Bam! What's up, folks? My name is Justin Garcia, also known as Master Chim, and welcome to the Warrior Stream. I am here every week at noon Eastern Standard Time talking about a different topic and having a good time while doing it. Before we get started on today's topic, I just wanted to bring up that if you guys check the descriptions, where I am streaming from now is a couple of Facebook pages, YouTube, X, and X I don't think has a description, but the other ones certainly do. Relevant links and free courses that I have available. A whole bunch of shit in the world of Master Chim is available to you via the links in the description. So, little backdrop on today. Actually, let me check in here. Jesse, what's up? Johnny Groove, what's up, brother man? Jamie, my man up in Canada. Good to see you guys. Corey, what's up? Willie, good to see you, my friend. Guys, check in. Say what's up to me. I'd love to see you. I always love seeing the usual suspects. And obviously, I always love seeing new people who found my stuff. Little guy, what's up, homie? Good to see you. Actually, I'll be seeing you later on, too, in a staff meeting. But I'm getting ready this morning for to write my email. And write my email, send it out, completely forget that it's Wednesday, and made the mistake of not checking my brick session schedule for the day and just started writing my email. And after the fact, it was on my mastermind call this morning, or right before I was getting my mastermind call this morning with the guys, I thought to myself, oh shit, I didn't design the live stream show today. So finished a little while ago. And then I realized, oh, today is episode 100 of these Warrior Stream sessions. So I should do something special. And I had this plan for doing something special. Maybe I'll do this idea that I had at another time. But then I was like, you know what? I just want to talk about shit I want to talk about. I don't feel like really making this whole presentation formally. And I just like talking about the things that I'm interested in most of the time. And right now, there is some beef going on between Candace Owens and Ben Shapiro. And I thought, while looking at this thing from afar, there's so many tribalnomics variables that are playing themselves out in this scenario that I wanted to talk about that. I wanted to talk about some of the, the positions that they've shared, some of the things that maybe is hypocritical in some instances, not hypocritical in others. But the idea of it is, a lot of people, I think, are becoming very emotional about this argument between Ben Shapiro and Candace Owens. And I don't really think there's much of an argument for ever reacting emotionally to people, and the people's lives that have nothing to do with you and those surrounding your life. In other words, why are you getting upset about people who have absolutely nothing to do with you? So let's talk about the situation. If you don't know what the hell's going on between Candace Owens and Ben Shapiro, let's break it down. So Candace Owens, conservative personality, started working for Daily Wire. Daily Wire was founded by Ben Shapiro and I think some other big money billionaire. And they hired Candace Owens at one point. I think right now the most popular personalities on Daily Wire were Candace and Matt Walsh. I'll be honest, I had paid for a subscription to Daily Wire when Walsh came out with the What is a Woman documentary. And I remember doing a video about that some time ago. And shortly after that, it was just too offset from who I am that I canceled my membership. I appreciated Candace Owens' sort of expose on the George Floyd debacle. Great, documentary, great reporting of information that otherwise we wouldn't have been privy to. So all under the banner of the Daily Wire, like a bunch of good stuff was done. However, there was an identity in the Daily Wire that did not resonate to a functional level with who I am. And I did not want to maintain an alliance with an identity that was not functionally overlapped. So a little bit of tribalnomics language. What do I mean to the person who's never read the book, Tribalnomics? I understood that the owners of Daily Wire have, I would say, a minimum of 3 missions, right? Any identity has, right off the bat, 2 missions. Every identity has 2 missions. One is self-preservation, and the second mandatory perennial, mission that an identity has is the collection of rituals, sort of the target of their rituals. So if I open a pizza shop, I have 2 main missions right off the bat: keep the pizza shop open and sell pizza, right? So those 2 things may be overlapped, they may be synonymous at points, but sometimes they may not be. There is a point where in the Daily Wire, I realized, aside from remaining functional as a business, aside from putting out conservative content, there was also a sort of correlated sentiment of we should, at default, as American citizens, as patriotic, conservative-leaning American citizens, and I consider myself to be both conservative and patriotic, in a general sense, maybe I'm a little bit more center or liberal on some other social issues, but I think for the most part, I'm comfortable somebody saying that I'm conservative. But aside from whatever we think those values are supposed to entail, in the Daily Wire, way back then, I realized there was this idea that we should also be supportive of Israel to a point whereby it was almost like they wanted to be included at the table of patriotism. In order to be a patriot to America, you need to have this sort of fealty, or at least an alliance, a drive to align oneself with Israel and the plight of Israel. I think it's somewhat ironic that, maybe a few days ago, Ben Shapiro said just that. He made that point. In a conversation with Jeremy Boring, who I think is the CEO of the company, and Matt Walsh. It was the 3 of them having, I don't know what the fuck they were talking. I don't know if this was an event or whatever, but I just saw a video clip. And he pretty much said, Ben Shapiro made the distinction between a nationalist and a patriot. And I don't want to get into some sort of bogged down by semantics of what this word means, that means. Like, what we're discussing today isn't really, pivoting on whether or not a word means something that we think it means. It's really the concepts and the ideas, right? So we could be a little loose with the language so long as we're painting the proper, accurate picture of what it is that our position is. And Ben Shapiro pretty much said that he thinks that, in order to be a patriot, you need to, and I'm paraphrasing at this point, something to the effect of honoring the integrity and the reputation of America as being reliable in the eyes of its allies. And I think that that's great in concept, but I think there is a conflation of whether or not we are being a good ally and whether or not we should be dedicated to the ally. There's a distinction to be made there. Whenever 2 identities make an alliance, there are terms under which that alliance is made. Now, these terms may or may not be codified, but there is an understanding of what the expectations for the other person happens to be. But the alliance is never to the identity as it evolves throughout time. Married people get divorced, right? Marriage is not permanent. And it is because it is not permanent that men and women, husband and wives, choose to work together to process a successful marriage. It is not permanent. Alliances are not permanent. So if we say that alliances are not permanent, that means that if an ally changes their mission to a point that now becomes dysfunctional within the framework of the alliance now either gets downgraded, upgraded, or severed completely. So this idea that because Israel has been designated an ally, in what official capacity, it's not something that I care to even figure out or research. It doesn't matter for my intents and purposes. I'm just much more interested in commenting on the dynamics of the identities here. But because we are an official ally of Israel, again, whatever that means, that does not mean that Israel as an ally gets to do whatever it wants and we're supposed to remain. In order to be patriotic to who we are and our reputation, we have to follow through. That is not what the United States' mission should be. There's a great scene at the end of the movie 13 Assassins, one of my favorite, at least more preferred samurai movies, and fairly recent. It was maybe within the last 20 years. And there were two classmates, dojo mates, these two samurai. And spoiler alert, if you haven't seen the movie, you should definitely still watch it if you haven't, though. And one guy is charged with being, I'll use easy language, the protector of this psychopath. The psychopath is in line to become the boss. He is, obligated to protect this person. His classmate is on the mission of assassinating this guy. Now, the protector, right, the bodyguard, he knows that his boss is a psychopath, and the world would be a better place if this guy was dead. But his relationship with his own integrity and honor have him battle his classmate. And right before that battle happened, the classmate, the assassin who was sent to kill the psychopath, basically pleads with him to some extent. Like, this guy's got to go. Like, I don't want to fight you over this. Like, this guy's, whatever. And the samurai's reaction, the bodyguard samurai's reaction is like, basically, I don't give a fuck if I'm guarding a psychopath. I'm his bodyguard. And if I allow anybody to kill him, then that is a commentary on me, not them. That is what Ben Shapiro is leveraging the United States' reputation as being, or as our identity as being, as if we will look at standing by our allies, regardless of what it is that they're doing and who they're becoming, as a commentary on our integrity, like a samurai would, be defending his ally or his master. Such is not the case. The United States government is, is supposed to be a representative entity of the United States' people's will, codified and framed to a great extent by our Constitution, by our laws, et cetera, et cetera. This idea that we're supposed to let Israel do whatever it wants just because it's our ally is a flawed one, is my point. Now, in that instance, or in this specific scenario, I'm not saying that Ben Shapiro is necessarily at fault here. I'm not saying that, therefore, because I don't agree with this framing of the situation by Shapiro, I'm not saying, and therefore Candace Owens is the one that's right. Now, full disclosure, I'm a fan of Candace Owens. I appreciate Candace Owens. One of the things that I'm most of a fan about is I think, and I think I share this with her, having watched a lot of her content. She doesn't like being perceived as somebody who's being controlled. She's very autonomous. She's very, independent-minded, and I think it informs the alliances that she makes. Similarly, I'm somebody who's going to be me, and there are certain situations where I will not put myself in a professional capacity, because I know in order to sustain my professional obligations in this particular, potential role, I would have to offset to a level that I'm not comfortable with from who I am. I would have to pretend to be somebody that I'm not for too long of a time or to too great an extent that I just as soon not do it. And I think I see a lot of that in Candace Owens. Probably why, I could appreciate her view. I don't agree with everything that she stands for. And even that, like, why even have to say that out loud, right? Because obviously we don't agree with everybody else. Like, that's just a thing. But today's society, it's one of those things you almost want to get on record, right? So you get credit for it. But when we're looking at the situation, Ben Shapiro, is Ben Shapiro conservative? Yes. Is he an American? Yes. But Ben Shapiro is a supporter of Israel to a level that I would say, and I don't even think this is controversial. I think his loyalty to Israel transcends his loyalty to America. Now, saying that America should always support Israel, or whatever way that he put that point that I had just gone over, of course he's going to say that because he doesn't ever want to be put in a situation where he has to, even by being asked outright or just limited in his commentary, he doesn't want to be reduced to saying, Israel or America. Like, he doesn't want to have to be put in a position where he has to be perceived to choose which one. So sure, he's going to keep them aligned as much as he can. In other words, it makes sense. You cannot like him for that. And whatever, that's fine. But to me, I'm just not surprised by that. Of course, he's going to say whatever he needs to say, because this is another thing that we don't realize. We want to accuse people of being deceptive and covert with their intentions. And of course people aren't going to let you know everything they're thinking. Of course, people are not going to let you know, like you buy a car, right? They're going to have a commercial with some guy smiling on some sunny highway somewhere, and everything's great. And they're talking about the features. They don't talk about the time the fucking brakes went and fucking the old lady hit the wall, during the first 3 months of its release. And they had that recall that it changes part. They're not going to put that in a fucking commercial. A lot of people are going to be producing content online, and they have a mission. They have a motive, a target, an outcome. That what it is that they're putting out there in terms of content is trying to generate. Ben Shapiro, I think, really, really wants to make money, but he also wants to support Israel. If there is an argument, because of his, his individual connections with Israel, if there is a legitimate argument as to why, let's just say, and this is a hypothetical, where the U.S. should stop supporting Israel in any way, form, or function, he is never going to say, yeah, that's the thing that makes sense. And to expect him to say that is to say that his obligation to us and his integrity as a, commentator or a journalist, however you want to fucking describe him, that should transcend the obligation and loyalty he has to himself and his tribe, his people. Of course, he's going to try to put them in the best possible position. And I think that was one of the things that drove me to want to talk about this today. It's like, yeah, we're not going to agree with everything everybody says, but it doesn't mean we need to condemn them for pursuing their own motives, pursuing their own missions. Ben Shapiro is a Zionist, a Jew who is never going to say anything bad about Israel. He is never going to do anything that could result in Israel being in a worse off position. Why would we fault him for that? Now, before we get to Candace Owens, let's just see that through that whole idea of Israel and America. I think there is both preference and the pursuit of preference, i.e. logic. I think there are things to populate both of those arguments in what I'm going to say regarding America and Israel. I don't care about Israel one iota more than I care about any other country that I am not personally connected to. To me, it is literally a transactional relationship, my relationship. I understand that America has made certain connections and relationships with other nations to forward its own interests, certainly to forward the interests of the parties involved in furthering America's interests. But as far as I'm looking at it, to me, Israel's not any more special than any other country I do not have a personal connection to. My in-laws, my wife is Brazilian. My entire in-laws live in Brazil. If there was something going on in Brazil where If the outcome of this conflict resulted in America, let's say, going to war with Brazil on one end, or America supporting Brazil on the other end, being that half of my family lives in Brazil, do you actually expect me to sit here and just concede any point that would result in my family suffering in Brazil? Of course not. So I think, I'm hesitant to call it being naive, but I do think that we need to consider more of the context of the discussion we're having itself and the media that we're using to have these discussions. The context of the individuals cannot be lost, in other words. Do I think, Israel's the buzzword, and, as a copywriter and somebody who has a great interest in the game and the puzzle of marketing, our only ally in the Middle East. It's a great phrase, right? But last time I checked, there are a whole bunch of countries in the Middle East that we have a functional relationship with. So this whole, the only ally we have in the Middle East, I think it's a great marketing slogan. I think it's a tagline that really gains the support of the low-hanging fruit. And low-hanging fruit being the people who really just have a cursory level of even thinking about this whole thing. You'll recruit them because they go, yeah, well, that makes sense. That makes sense. There's no Muslim terrorists in Israel, right? They don't come from Israel. So yeah, our ally, the only one. Yeah, it makes sense. So it's a very powerful tagline to associate with Israel when having these conversations. That being said, that means nothing to me. I think it's also worth noting, I am not a Christian. I'm not a Jew. I'm not a Muslim. So there is no metaphysical connection that I have to any of these geographic, locations. I don't have a connection to these people in these places, which means to me, again, it's a very transactional lens through which I measure these relationships. I think for the benefit of the United States that no elected official, let's start getting into the candidates Owens things now. I think that no elected official should have dual citizenship. My children have dual citizenship. What does that mean? Their mother is a Brazilian citizen. So just by being born, being her kid, they have Brazilian citizenship. I didn't fill out any fucking papers to make them. It's just the nature of how they are becoming. It's birth citizenship. Ben Shapiro, I haven't validated this, but I'm willing to assume he also has dual citizenship. Ben Shapiro is allowed to have dual citizenship. Ben Shapiro is allowed to support Israel. Ben Shapiro is allowed to push the argument of supporting Brazilian forward. Ben Shapiro is a business person. He's an entrepreneur. He's not an elected official. He has not, in other words, taken an oath to support American citizens in the American sort of mission. So I expect him to support his people. I've said before, the only way people let us down is when we misset our expectations of them. If Ben Shapiro, leveraging his influence to support Israel, if that has let you down, then I would say that that's an expectations issue, right? That is not a betrayal issue. Let's talk about free speech for a second. Free speech is something that is codified in our Bill of Rights. But I'm going to show some support for a position that Ben Shapiro shared the other day. And to me, again, I have no horse in this race. Ben Shapiro indirectly, basically framing his position without actually discussing directly the Candace Owens firing, it seems like. He referred to the Overton window that exists at his company. And a lot of people were saying, well, he's a hypocrite if he says he supports free speech, but then fires Candace Owens because he didn't like what she said. I think at this point in American history, we need to stop making this mistake as American citizens. All you guys that were complaining that the gay baker shouldn't have to make the cake, or not the gay baker, the Christian baker shouldn't have had to make the gay cake, right? For the, I don't know if a cake could be gay, but for the guys that were getting married, right? The gay couple, they wanted a cake. They went to the Christian baker. He didn't want to make it, like they shouldn't have to. It's against their beliefs. So like, okay, the specifics of that situation aside, let's just look at the concepts at play here. An individual in his own company could do what the fuck he wants, and he can run it the way that is congruent to who he is. We used to support that, right? If Ben Shapiro, the Zionist Jew, does not want to employ somebody who is making an argument critical of Israel, it doesn't matter whether you agree with his position or not. You have to understand and concede this is his fucking company. And I say his company, obviously he's a partner or a founder, whatever it is, but I'm pretty sure they all think like him, right? They're overlapped, right? So why would we think that he would want to employ somebody in a company that is absolutely pro-Zionist if the person they're employing is not pro-Zionist? What if I had, one of the employees at my school decided one day he was a woman and started dressing like a woman to teach the kids class? Like, how the fuck am I supposed to feel about that? But now here's the thing. My position, if somebody were to ask me, I would say, do you think trannies should be legal? It's like, it's a ridiculous premise even asking that. What do you mean legal? Do you think men should be able to act like they're women and say they're women and dress like women? Of course. I don't give a fuck what they do. But what if they wanted to use the women's bathroom? That's a different question. You asked me if I thought it should be allowed that men dress like women and act like women. That's fine. Now you're asking me if a man can go in a woman's bathroom. It's a different question. But even though I support it even sounds, again, ridiculous to even say, does a man have the right to be a tranny? If one of my kid class instructors decided he wanted to be a tranny, I might be like, yeah, you shouldn't do that. Or can you do that shit when you're not at work, or some other rendition of that? Maybe a little more severe. I'm being on my best behavior, right? But the whole thing is, if I had a criticism for having that does not negate or debunk my position that a man should be allowed to do that. He can do that all the fuck he wants, but not teaching my fucking kids class in my martial arts academy. It's a different position. So when I hear Ben Shapiro saying that there's an Overton window in the company, I don't think he did a very good job of explaining his position. But I also don't think he did an inaccurate one. I gleaned from what he had shared exactly what I'm describing right now. It's like, yeah, he wants to run his company with people who support the things he supports. It's his fucking company. That's the benefit of doing that, right? In the world of jiu-jitsu, there's this whole world of sport jiu-jitsu that I want really little to nothing to do with. I started martial arts because of violence, right? Because of the martial aspect of it. There's a lot of, they should call it the arts formerly martial, or the martial light arts, or something. But it's a world that I want nothing to do with. By the way, there's great value in that, and there are people who identify and resonate with that value that participate in it, but it's not what I do. People in my school, they fight. You're going to get punched. You train in my school, you're going to get punched in the face at some point. Because that is what we prepare. That is what we're a part of. But that's me running the school. Now imagine if there was some pressure from the jiu-jitsu community to do, all this other hokey shit that they're doing in competitions. Like, I had to be more supportive. Like, why? Leave me the fuck alone. So here's the thing with Ben Shapiro. I think there's going to be a consequence for this controversy that I would say he allowed to develop. But all that's going to do is sort of reset the position or the perception of the brand of what Daily Wire is. And there will be some people that at the end of this will be more overlapped with the perception of Daily Wire, and there will be people who will be less overlapped with the position of the Daily Wire. Imagine you're a single guy. You go on a date with a pretty girl. Everything's going great. Personality's great. You guys get along, making jokes. Everything's fine. The end of the night, she goes, by the way, I just want to let you know 6 months ago I was a man. It's like, man, sweetie, you got to lead with that, right? You got to lead with that. You know, I got to get those 4 hours and for a couple $100 back, you know, but here's the thing. I think the Daily Wire has, because of a situation that just happened, you know, with Israel and Gaza and everything that's going on, Hamas, etc., like that has shined the light on Daily Wire is not the company that collectively people thought it was. Right. So there'll be some people that identify more with who they are now and some people who identify less. And like, to me, we should not be getting excited beyond that point, nor should we feel compelled to take a position that we do not share. So Candace Owens has, actually, before I get into Candace Owens, I keep putting it off, but what do we got here? All right. Comments. John Saxon, what's up? Mad Guardian says, between the Crowder debacle and now this, I have the Daily Wire very low and a list of informative alternative media. Yeah. And that's what happens. We wind up seeing, you know, I'm the pressure to power guy. It's like, yeah, they go through a little bit of pressure and then we get to see what they're made of. Right. And so we're able to have a more informed position because we've been able to witness them going through some stress and some pressure. So they've revealed a little bit more of their authentic identity. Right. And we can make alliance decisions based on that new information. You're hanging out with a buddy. He's great. Everything's awesome. I had a kid I went to junior high school with. His name is Omar. I'm not going to say his last name, but his name was Omar. Omar was a buddy of mine. Like, I actually defended Omar in a couple of instances where people were trying to fuck with him. This is 7th grade, 8th grade, whatever it was. And one day we're going to a hooky party and we get jumped in Edenwald Projects in the Bronx. And I look up and Omar's halfway down the fucking block. And I'm looking at the back of his head while he's hightailing it down the block. Well, I have a bunch of kids trying to stomp my head in. I was fine with Omar right up until that pressurized situation revealed who Omar was. Never had an alliance with him again. So this is the great thing about these pressurized situations. You get to actually see the authentic identity of individuals in a light that you had not seen it before prior to these pressurized situations. And you can make alliance decisions based on that new information, right? Jamie says, there's no sense in choosing a side in a dispute over homeland fought between two sides, both of which insist you have no right to a homeland of your own. Right. And there is a futility in how people are going to sort of calculate, what the outcome of this is supposed to be. My oldest son, who's 17, had asked me some months ago, he's like, do you think Israel has a right to that land? And I said, absolutely. 100%. And he said, why would you say that? And I said, because they have it, because they're there. If anybody else thinks they should have that land, go and take it. If you can't, then shut the fuck up. Maybe a little simplistic, but they can't do something about it. So what do? They populate narratives and they try to recruit support. Like, I get it. It's the game. They're not strong enough to take it back. So they're going to try and create a narrative to win the support to be able to take it back. That's how Israel got it in the first place, right? They made an argument, got support, eventually were able to be stronger than anybody who opposed their position. Strength always wins, right? So there's, again, from an American perspective for a moment here, what the fuck do we got to do with that? I have a lot of friends of mine and allies of mine who are Christian. And a lot of them over the last few weeks and months have shared through social media a position based on their Christian identity. I do not fault them for that. But do me a favor. Pretend America is a joint bank account. How about you don't write any checks from the account that we both share? Support it on an individual level. Support it in a way that you find people are overlap. But as far as America is concerned, yeah, I'm not signing that check. Right? But again, even my position is debatable. There are other people who think that factually my position is unfounded. And that's fine. These are conversations we should be having. But as soon as somebody, see, here's the thing, right? There's too much outrage, right? Men, they get too outraged nowadays. Whenever somebody is outraged over something, I am immediately not on his side. And it's like, yeah, but what? So you support this? No. I just don't support a grown fucking man acting outraged all the time. Like that's the thing I don't fucking support. What you're talking about, like, we'll deal with that next. But can you not act like this? And a lot of people get outraged, and it's just a waste of fucking energy. And it drives people or pulls people into an emotional state, which is much more malleable. It's just irresponsible to talk about these things so emotionally all the time. Right? All right. Jamie says dual citizenship is almost a self-declaration of treason. And I'll tell you, and I shared this position before, my kids have dual citizenship with Brazil because of birthright citizenship, because their mother's Brazilian. If the United States went to war with Brazil, hypothetical, but I got to have these uncomfortable, what ifs if I'm going to be the guy talking about this stuff. If the United States went to war with Brazil, why would I ever support Brazil beyond getting the people I care about into the United States? Like, there would never be some sort of, well, I'm, like you can't fly two flags. I'm not the first person to say that. You cannot fly two flags. If those flags are in opposition to one another, then you are in an unwinnable situation. And if it's an unwinnable situation, there's no movement that leads one to a remedy, right? It winds up being sort of inconsistent from an identity scale, right? Mad Guardian says Shapiro American, that's debatable, right? And here's the thing: when you're an American, you could talk very aggressively about your support for other countries. The one thing that I don't hold against Shapiro is the fact that, listen, he's a Zionist, Israel supporting Jew. Of course, that's what he's going to be. What he's talking about. Why would we expect him to talk about anything else? The guys that really take it up a notch with me are the guys like what's his fucking name, Chuck Schumer, who's an elected politician who also, I believe, shares dual citizenship. One of many that I think. And to me, it's like, if you want to become an elected official, you should have to renounce any other loyalties, codified loyalties to other countries. And I think that should kind of like just make sense. But we don't call them loopholes, right? Well, we call them loopholes, but what these things that we call loopholes are really sort of exploitative, able to be exploited dynamics that exist legally in the way that our laws are written up. They're not doing anything against the rules, in other words. So we could sit here all day and say they shouldn't be able to do that. But if there's not a law against it, they could always rebut what we're saying by saying, I'm not breaking any laws. So then it comes down to, well, do we want to make laws to stop this? Maybe. Ideally, people should be able to do the right thing without having to be regulated legally. We shouldn't have to legislate people acting functionally in their alliance with us collectively. But maybe that's what it's come to, right? Corey says it's crazy how lightly we're supposed to tiptoe around this subject. Yeah, and I'll listen. If you're a guy that if you talk about your political views and you're going to get fired, you should not talk about your political views. There are some things that it's very hard, difficult, or even I'm unwilling to censor myself about. But the other side of that coin is I better know how to make $1. I better know how to make money and provide for my family. if I want this level of autonomy and independence. I'm not fully free or independent by any means, and I don't ever want to give that impression. There's plenty of people that, or let me not go right to that. Let's just say there are a lot of things I would like to do during the course of a day that I don't, because it's like, nope, juice ain't worth the squeeze. It's not worth it. Let me just follow this rule, because not following the rule represents an outcome that would be more stressful or would cost more than just complying with this particular rule. And everybody has relationships with all of those restrictions and regulations around themselves and their lives, right? Jamie says, not everyone deserves a seat at the table in certain discussions because their interests exist elsewhere. Absolutely. And I think when you have ambiguous loyalties, that should be, on the surface of how you're dealt with. It's like, well, of course you can't have a say in this, because obviously this is the outcome that you want, right? Mad Guardian said, what are your alliances, Candace? You would think that would have been a day one interview question. You'd think, right? You'd think. Ben Shapiro, citing that it wasn't having to do with the whole Israel thing, had brought up that Matt Walsh has said, similar to my point of view, that, listen, that ain't America's fucking problem. They could sort that shit out. But it's our own self-interest that should be the priority of how we delegate our resources. To which I think Shapiro labeled it, isolationist. And it's not fucking isolationist, right? It's America first. That's what it is. But Matt Walsh has said that. I think with Matt Walsh, though, there is less of a willingness to say anything that's going to have some energy behind it that would compromise the supporters or the core supporters of the Daily Wire's mission. I think Candace Owens, she wasn't going to play nice. I think Matt Walsh is playing nice. I think it's a difference. I'm the type of guy that if I'm Matt Walsh, and just knowing what I know on a surface level, I don't know none of us know all the variables at play here, right? So we're just having a conversation based on what we all know, and we have to concede the limitation of that perspective. But I could comfortably say, if, from what I understand, Matt Walsh, who he is and the position he's in, if Candace Owens is ousted after this, why would I not leave, like, in support of just my ability to operate and be who I am? Because as soon as Candace Owens is out, that's obviously letting everybody know who's still in. Yeah, this is what happens to people who do that. And that might not be the constraints that you would want to operate under, right? I always talk about in the dynamic of the tyrant. The person who is exposed to the tyrant's influence and control does two things. They either betray the tyrant by either disengaging or ending the alliance, or telling the tyrant what they want to hear. In other words, acting, deceptively, or they betray themselves. And the way they betray themselves, I'll use the analogy of they've been made by the tyrant to live in a box, and the box isn't comfortable. So they shrink themselves to be able to exist comfortably in the box. And I think people react to tyrants in different ways at different points in their life. Sometimes we act in our own interest. Sometimes we shrink so that we fit to the box that we've been given. And I would question what Matt Walsh's position is right now. Again, I'm willing to concede there's plenty of variables I'm not aware of. But it's like, why would anybody want to exist in a situation where you are at a fundamental disagreement with your employers, and they've already shown the precedents that they will get rid of somebody who doesn't toe the line, right? So let's get into a lot of the criticisms that I think were responsible or led up to Candace Owens being fired from the Daily Wire. This idea of a genocide, right? Now, there are, linguistic definitions of genocide. There are legal definitions of genocide. Do I think Israel has the intent of killing everybody or eliminating, maybe that's killing or just displacing everybody that lives in the Gaza Strip, or all of the Palestinians. I don't know. I have no fucking idea. Do I think Israel is going to really give a fuck about civilians dying while they're targeting Hamas? No, I don't. Do I think they should give a shit? I think if they could avoid civilian death, they should. But they should not stop one bit of violence to target enemies that they have identified as enemies of Israel, just to appease the civilians, because then it incentivizes a system where civilians are leveraged to decrease the reaction or the response of Israel. If you stop firing at me, if I take a baby and put it in front of me, that's how I stop you from firing. I don't have to do anything to you. I could just create the scenario that your protocols have you reduce your level of response. I've never been in war, right? So let me preface this by saying that. And I understand the stories that have been shared with me over the years of what that type of reality looks like. I cannot say that I've ever been through any sort of relatable experience, but on a logical level, with some bit of context, with the various, experiences I've had with violence over the years, I understand it is not a place that people want to reside in. I also understand, and sometimes Nietzsche is interpreted as being pro-violence, but I think that's a misinterpretation of Nietzsche's writings. I think what is more accurate is that Nietzsche seemed to understand that violence brought about a change in people that people have yet to replace with some other ritual that provides that same type of outcome. Meaning, violence ain't going anywhere anytime soon. All the people that seem to be losing their minds over civilian deaths in Gaza, like, you guys know that we dropped like a nuclear bomb on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, right? Like a lot of people died when we did that. I'm pretty sure, and I haven't researched this. I haven't asked ChatGPT. I haven't Googled it. But I'm willing to bet that not everybody that died from those bombs had a rifle in their hand and was aiming it at America. So this idea that we don't understand violence, it's just inconsistent, I think. Again, the fucking outrage, like, oh, the outrage, I can't believe the genocide. So now genocide, this idea of genocide. Well, it's why, words mean things, and we have to be careful in how we use them, because if I understand genocide, right, it's made up, the side, the prefix or the root is to kill. Geno is like, I think, an identity or an ethnicity or a group, right? So it's like, are you trying to kill this? I don't think they're trying to kill all the Palestinians. If they are, I don't think they're doing a good job. Let's just be honest. They could do, if they really want to kill all the Palestinians, they're really doing a shitty job, But I do think there is a lesser regard for civilian casualties than we have from the American perspective. I think Candace bringing up the civilian deaths and using it as a point to criticize Israel, I think it's valid, right? There are plenty of people who I know in the military community, active and otherwise, who said, yeah, like, this should be a special operations, mission 100%. But even then, you have to understand the limitations of that. It's not like civilians aren't going to die just because you sent in as specific a targeted group as possible. Like, that's just not the way it's going to work. This is violence. This is war. So I think if we look at Israel and we say they should be doing this instead of that, and we could support that argument. This plan of action would give Israel the same outcome they want with less civilian casualties. In other words, less of a human cost than the one that they're using. Like, that's the argument that should be made. But when the argument is made that civilians are dying while Israel's trying to kill its enemies, I just don't think that that's a consistent position that Americans can have. I don't think there's one life that should be lost unnecessarily. Like, understand, that's the position that I would love to start in and stay in. But in reality, that just doesn't seem the way we've ever conducted ourselves. And I don't mean covertly, deceptively, CIA type shit. I mean, like, yeah, we drop bombs on people. We send the military to certain places. Sometimes we watch a video of a cop shooting a bad guy with a gun. And it's like, I guess it's unfortunate that the guy had to die. I think you're supposed to say that. But it's like, of course he had to get shot. Motherfucker had a gun. He had to go. Fucked up a long time ago, bro. So now there are going to be people who are in a situation where no cause of their own, they're living in that, in that shithole, and poverty, water issues, violence, infrastructure, all these different things to be able to, like, there are, it's an argument that the conditions under which these people are living are horrible. But again, that is an issue that should be dealt with separately from the response of Israel and civilian casualties that result from that response. If Israel had this problem with France, and they were talking about Israel killing French people, when trying to get their targets, it would not even have anything to do with the poverty and all these other issues that the people in that region are facing. It would just have to do with the civilian casualties. I think when looking at this situation with Israel and Gaza, in their pursuit of Hamas, civilians are dying. I think, there should be one option chosen over another option if one has less civilian casualties. If they are being negligent in their consideration for the lives of Palestinians, that's something that, collectively we could have a conversation with them about, because we've all agreed to play nice, right? There's codified, positions that people are supposed to follow when it comes to things that could be perceived as being genocidal. There's the Geneva Convention. Like, we have rules in war collectively. And it's basically, the idea of it is, we'll let you guys fight one-on-one as long as, one of you guys doesn't break the rules. You guys break the rules, then you're going to have to all of us are going to gang up against you. Like, these are the agreements that exist at that level of scale. So Candace Owens brings that stuff up. It's not going to put Israel in a favorable light if she can get people to identify with the unacceptable cost of casualties, while Israel, reacts or responds to the Hamas attacks. So they cut her loose. They took away her platform and severed the alliance with her, just to strengthen their position to the best of their ability. I understand that. By the way, Candace Owens, it's like, it's almost like Tucker Carlson's situation. It's like she's going to be better off not existing in an ecosystem that doesn't at the core level support who she is and what she stands for. What other comments we have here? Steven says, to me, I'm more of a supporter of the one fighting the people who actively cheer and hope for our downfall. Yeah, and you know what? There's something to be said for that. Although, where that falls short is when the people who are actively cheering for our downfall don't necessarily, let me say this properly. The people who are cheering for our downfall have a direct relationship with us. The people who are causing their downfall have a direct relationship with us. And each of those relationships should be managed independently. In other words, we don't have to choose a side. The side that we're always at default supporting is our side. So Israel Hamas, these people fucking hate us. Yeah, they'll get the smoke, but because we're opposed to them, that does not put us in lockstep or obligate us and our resources to Israel. There's a certain point where it's like, hey, listen, if you're going to go, how many times have you seen this in movies? A bunch of guys are going to jump in a car to go beat somebody up or go kill somebody. And the protagonist goes, you know what? Nah, I'm going to stay behind, guys. It's like, yeah, I'm your ally, but you're going to do some shit that is beyond the scope of our alliance. You see, it is literally written on the board behind me here, but one of the Tribalnomics edicts is alliance before ally. Alliance before ally. The agreement you have, the understanding of why you are connected to somebody, should be held with higher regard than the individual themselves. Because our obligation to somebody resides completely in the alliance we have with them, not in the preservation of who they are, despite the decisions they make. So I think when looking at one side or the other side, it's like, well, how do they each individually relate to us? John Saxa says, most people complain about things they have no power over. It's like, change it or shut the fuck up. That literally may have been an email of mine in the past, because the sentiment is certainly one that I share. Corey says, some of these characters work to strengthen their own group by weakening the groups around them. Absolutely. Logan says, warrior salute to you, my friend. Jamie says, getting shades of the rebel media Israel trip from a few years back involving Gannett McGinnis, Lawrence Southern, etc. I can't say that I am very informed as to what that is. But one of the things I will say that reminded me of, that I'm curious of, is now how you have certain people outwardly expressing support for one side or other on this, because they almost feel like, I guess that's what they have to do. I guess to some extent, that's what I'm doing right now, right? But I just talk about this because it's fucking interesting. But there are going to be people who, in order to preserve their brand, are going to say, I'm anti-Israel. They're going to be people, in order to support their brand, they're going to say, I'm pro-Israel. But you start to see people self-select at this point, which to me is all interesting. It's like, oh, that's where he thinks his mission is going to be pursued more effectively. Jamie says, here in China, you might be perpetrating genocide if you give someone a hard glance. Johan Saxon says, this is an episode of my podcast last night about cults. Same concept. When you question a leader or the cult's narrative, they get shunned or public humiliation ensues, so people speak out less. Yeah, if you look at the dynamic of identities and this concept of overlap and offset between identities, where an individual exists outside the scope of an alliance, we call that offset. In a cult, in order to create a culture, you need to disincentivize the offset. When you disincentivize the offset, it's like, imagine you are, that Play-Doh, right? Play-Doh stuff. You want to cut out a circle, right? So you have that little, I don't know, is it a stencil? You know what the fuck I'm talking about. It's a circle, right? So you flatten out the Play-Doh, you put the circle, and then you pull off all of the edges outside. Those edges are the offset. The actual tool is the mission, and what resides inside once you remove the offset, which is technically 100% overlap, is now where culture is born. So if you have a cult looking to create culture, you have to codify the disincentivization of offset. And doesn't mean that there needs to be punishment, but there's certainly the withdrawal or removal of reward. In other words, it pays to go along with what we're saying you should do. Any group, any alliance that codifies those parameters drives overlap amongst the participants, increasing the likelihood of what would be considered a culture, or at a lower scale, we use the term cult, right? But you're absolutely right. All these dynamics are at play. Jamie says, meanwhile, no one wants to talk about who lived in the Arctic before the Inuit showed up, which was a couple hundred years after the Normans arrived in England. Don't sidetrack the conversation, Jamie. Logan says, back to work. Keep hammering, boys and girls. Rise strength upon strength. Victory. Right on. Good to see you, my man. Mad Guardian says, we pretend the world all plays by the same rules. I would say at the politics at a national level scale, that is those are the narratives that'll be shared, right? This idea that, hey, we're all a big family, we're all going to get along. It's like, no, you know what? I'm going to look out for my shit. You look out for your shit. You don't touch my shit, I won't touch your shit. If I want some of your shit, I ask you for your shit. You might ask me for some of my shit in return, and then there ain't going to be a problem as long as everybody does what they're supposed to do. It's why I would say one of the major, if not the major driver of the evolution of Western civilization was the codified protection of the individual. When we stopped, in a political sense, having a conduit from some metaphysical identity be the arbiter of reality and its rules, and we started saying what was right, what was wrong, what was fair, what was unfair, and the things that existed more logically, I think what you wound up getting was a codified collective protection of an individual's right to remain an individual. The most functional tribes you will ever have are those where its individual members follow their own self-interests collectively. Meaning, in order for me to be me, I'm doing the things that just happen to be the way that you can be you. That is where you'll have a successful tribal dynamic. Matt Guardian says, hail to the rebels, renegades, and rogues. Fucking A. All right, guys. Holy shit, we're over an hour. This is a little bit of a different thing. I wanted to, I enjoy talking about these dynamics. There's a reason I wrote the book, TRIBALNOMICS. It's because these are the things that fascinate me. I come from a background and upbringing where these variables and the values that they represent had a profound impact on who I was and the reality that I was exposed to growing up. When there are these public scenarios that have captured everybody's interest, where I see a great opportunity to discuss some of these dynamics, I have a good time while doing it. I hope you guys did too. But let's call it there. I'm Bert. I will see you guys next week, same time. And as always, brothers and sisters, pressure to power.